Hi everyone, welcome back to Scripture on Sundays. Today we're going to continue with chapters 31, 32, and 33 of Genesis. All right, let's get started. Chapter 31, the flight from Laban. That is Jacob's wives, both of his wives. It was a thing back then. It's their father. Jacob learned that Laban's sons were saying, "Jacob has taken everything that belonged to our father, and he has accumulated all this wealth of his by using our father's property." Jacob perceived, too, that Laban's attitude toward him was not what it had previously been. Then the Lord said to Jacob, "Return to the land of your fathers, where you were born, and I will be with you." So Jacob sent for Rachel and Leah to meet with him where he was in the field with his flock. There he said to them, "I have noticed that your father's attitude toward me is not as it was in the past, but the God of my father has been with me. You well know what effort I have put into serving your father. Yet your father cheated me and changed my wages time after time. God, however, did not let him do me any harm. Whenever your father said, 'The speckled animals shall be your wages,' the entire flock would bear speckled young. Whenever he said, 'The streaked animals shall be your wages,' the entire flock would bear streaked young. Thus God reclaimed your father's livestock and gave it to me. Once in the breeding season, I had a dream in which I saw the mating he-goats that were streaked, speckled, and mottled. In the dream, God's messenger said to me, 'Jacob.' 'Here,' I replied. Then he said, 'Note well, all the he-goats in the flock as they mate are streaked, speckled, and mottled. For I have seen all the things that Laban has been doing to you. I am the God who appeared to you in Bethel, where you anointed a memorial stone and made a vow to me. Up then, leave this land and return to the land of your birth.' Rachel and Leah answered him, 'Have we still an heir's portion in our father's house? Are we not regarded by him as outsiders? He not only sold us, he has even used up the money that he got for us. All the wealth that God reclaimed from our father really belongs to us and our children. Therefore, do just as God has told you.' Jacob proceeded to put his children and wives on camels, and he drove off with all his livestock and all the property he had acquired in Paddan Aram to go to his father Isaac in the land of Canaan. Now Laban had gone away to shear his sheep, and Rachel had meanwhile taken her father's household idols. Jacob had hoodwinked Laban in Aramean by not telling him of his intended flight. Thus he made his escape with all he had. Once he was across the Euphrates River, he headed for the highlands of Gilead. On the third day, word came to Laban that Jacob had fled. Taking his kinsman with him, he pursued him for 7 days until he caught up with him in the hill country of Gilead. But that night God appeared to Laban the Aramean and in a dream and warned him, 'Take care not to threaten Jacob with any harm.' Jacob and Laban in Gilead. When Laban overtook Jacob, Jacob's tents were pitched in the highlands. Laban also pitched his tents there on Mount Gilead. 'What do you mean,' Laban demanded of Jacob, 'by hoodwinking me and carrying off my daughters like war captives? Why did you dupe me by stealing away secretly? You should have told me, and I would have sent you off with merry singing and the sound of tambourines and harps. You did not even allow me a parting kiss to my daughters and grandchildren. What you have now done is a senseless thing. I have it in my power to harm all of you. But last night the God of your father said to me, 'Take care not to threaten Jacob with any harm.' Granted that you had to leave because you were desperately homesick for your father's house. Why did you steal my gods?' 'I was frightened,' Jacob replied to Laban, 'at the thought that you might take your daughters away from me by force. But as for your gods, the idols, the one you find them with shall not remain alive.' Remember, Rachel took them. 'If, with my kinsmen looking on, you identify anything here as belonging to you, take it.' Jacob, of course, had no idea that Rachel had stolen the idols. Laban then went in, searched Jacob's tent and Leah's tent, as well as the tents of the 2 maidservants, but he did not find the idols. Leaving Leah's tent, he went into Rachel's. Now Rachel had taken the idols, put them inside a camel cushion, and seated herself upon them. When Laban had rummaged through the rest of her tent without finding them, Rachel said to her father, 'Let not my lord feel offended that I cannot rise in your presence. A woman's period is upon me.' So, despite his search, he did not find his idols. Jacob, now enraged, unbraided Laban. 'What crime or offense have I committed,' he demanded, 'that you should hound me so fiercely? Now that you have ransacked all my things, Have you found a single object taken from your belongings? If so, produce it here before your kinsmen and mine, and let them decide between us two. In the 20 years that I was under you, no ewe or she-goat of yours ever miscarried, and I have never feasted on a ram of your flock. I never brought you an animal torn by wild beasts. I made good the loss myself. You held me responsible for anything stolen by day or night. How often the scorching heat ravaged me by day and the frost by night, while sheep fled from my eyes. Of the 20 years that I have now spent in your household, I slaved 14 years for your 2 daughters and 6 years for your flock, while you changed my wages time after time. If my ancestral God, the God of Abraham and the awesome one of Isaac, had not been on my side, you would now have sent me away empty-handed. But God saw my plight and the fruits of my toil, and last night he gave judgment. Laban replied to Jacob, The women are mine, their children are mine, and the flocks are mine. Everything you see belongs to me. But since these women are my daughters, I will now do something for them and for the children they have borne. Come then, we will make a pact, you and I. The Lord shall be witness between us. Then Jacob took a stone and set it up as a memorial stone. Jacob said to his kinsmen, Gather some stones. So they got some stones and made a mound, and they had a meal there at the mound. Laban called it Jegar-sahadathua, but Jacob named it Gilead. Or Laban called it Jegar-sahadathua, but Jacob called it Galeed. The mound, said Laban, shall be a witness from now on between you and me. That is why it was named Galeed. And also Mizpah, for he said, May the Lord keep watch between you and me when we are out of each other's sight. If you mistreat my daughters or take other wives besides my daughters, remember that, even though no one else is about, God will be witness between you and me. Laban said further to Jacob, Here is this mound, and here is the memorial stone that I have set up between you and me. This mound shall be witnessed, and this memorial stone shall be witness that, with hostile intent, neither may I pass beyond this mound into your territory, nor may you pass beyond it into mine. May the God of Abraham and the God of Nahor, their ancestral deities, maintain justice between us. Jacob took the oath by the awesome one of Isaac. He then offered a sacrifice on the mountain and invited his kinsmen to share in the meal. When they had eaten, they passed the night on the mountain. Chapter 32. Early the next morning, Laban kissed his grandchildren and his daughters goodbye. Then he set out on his journey back home, while Jacob continued on his way. Then God's messengers encountered Jacob. When he saw them, he said, This is God's encampment. So he named the place Mahanaim. Embassy to Esau. Remember, Esau was Jacob's brother, and he took his blessing from their father Isaac. Jacob sent messengers ahead of to his brother Esau in the land of Seir, the country of Edom, with this message, Thus shall you say to my lord Esau, Your servant Jacob speaks as follows, I have been staying with Laban and have been detained there until now. I own cattle, donkeys, not saying it on the internet, and sheep, as well as male and female servants. I am sending my lord this information in the hope of gaining your favor. When the messengers returned to Jacob, they said, We reached your brother Esau. He is now coming to meet you, accompanied by 400 men. Jacob was very much frightened. In his anxiety, he divided the people who were with him, as well as his flocks, herds, and camels, into 2 camps. If Esau should attack and overwhelm one camp, he reasoned, the remaining camp may still survive. Then he prayed, O God of my father Abraham and God of my father Isaac, you told me, O Lord, go back to the land of your birth, and I will be good to you. I am unworthy of all the acts of kindness that you have loyally performed for your servant. Although I crossed the Jordan here with nothing but my staff, I have now grown into 2 companies. Save me, I pray, from the hand of my brother Esau. Otherwise, I fear that when he comes, he will strike me down and slay the mothers and children. You yourself said, I will be very good to you, and I will make your descendants like the sands of the sea, which are too numerous to count. After passing the night there, Jacob selected from what he had with him the following presents for his brother Esau: 200 she-goats and 20 he-goats, 200 ewes and 20 rams, 30 milk camels and their young, 40 cows and 10 bulls, 20 she-donkeys, and 10 he-donkeys. He put these animals in charge of his servants in separate droves, and he told the servants, "Go ahead of me, but keep a space between one drove and the next." To the servant in the lead, he gave this instruction: "When my brother Esau meets you, he may ask you, 'Whose man are you? Where are you going? To whom do these animals ahead of you belong?' Then you shall answer, 'They belong to your brother Jacob, but they have been sent as a gift by my lord to my lord Esau, and Jacob himself is right behind us.'" He gave similar instructions to the second servant and the third and all the others who followed behind the droves, namely, "Thus and thus shall you say to Esau when you reach him, and be sure to add, 'Your servant Jacob is right behind us.' For Jacob reasoned, 'If I first appease him with gifts that precede me, then later, when I face him, perhaps he will forgive me.' So the gifts went on ahead of him while he stayed that night in the camp." Struggle with the angel. In the course of that night, however, Jacob arose, took his 2 wives with the 2 maidservants and his 11 children, and crossed the ford to the Jabbok. Ford's like a river. To the Jabbok. After he had taken them across the stream and had brought over all his possessions, Jacob was left there alone. Then some man wrestled with him until the break of dawn. When the man saw that he could not prevail over him, he struck Jacob's hip at its socket, so that the hip socket was wrenched as they wrestled. The man then said, "Let me go, for it is daybreak." But Jacob said, "I will not let you go until you bless me." "What is your name?" the man asked. He answered, "Jacob." Then the man said, "You shall no longer be spoken of as Jacob, but as Israel." Jacob became Israel. "Because you have contended with divine and human beings and have prevailed." Jacob then asked him, Do tell me your name, please." He answered, "Why should you want to know my name?" With that, he bade him farewell. Jacob named the place Peniel, because "I have seen God face to face," he said, "and yet my life has been spared." At sunrise, he left Peniel. Jacob limped along because of his hip. That is why, to this day, the Israelites do not eat the sciatic muscle that is on the hip socket, inasmuch as Jacob's hip socket was struck at the sciatic muscle. Last one, chapter 33. Jacob and Esau meet. Have you ever done something? Do you have a sibling or anything? Have you ever done something wrong that hurt your sibling, and then you had to, confront them later? Imagine how nervous he was. All right. Jacob looked up and saw Esau coming, accompanied by 400 men. So he divided his children among Leah, Rachel, and the 2 maidservants, putting the maids and their children first, Leah and her children next, and Rachel and Joseph last. He himself went on ahead of them, bowing to the ground 7 times until he reached his brother. Esau ran to meet him, embraced him, and flinging himself on his neck, kissed him as he wept. Not what Jacob expected. When Esau looked about, he saw the women and children. "Who are these with you?" he asked. Jacob answered, "They are the children whom God has graciously bestowed upon your servant." Then the maidservants and their children came forward and bowed low. Next, Leah and her children came forward and bowed low. Lastly, Rachel and her children came forward and bowed low. Then Esau asked, "What did you intend with all those droves that I encountered?" Jacob answered, "It was to gain my lord's favor." "I have plenty," replied Esau. "You should keep what is yours, brother." "No, I beg you," said Jacob. "If you will do me the favor, please accept this gift from me, since to come into your presence is for me like coming into the presence of God. Now that you have received me so kindly, do accept the present I have brought you. God has been generous toward me, and I have an abundance." Since he so urged him, Esau accepted. Then Esau said, "Let us break camp and be on our way. I will travel alongside you." But Jacob replied, "As my lord can see, the children are frail. Besides, I am encumbered with the flocks and herds, which now have sucklings. If overdriven for a single day, the whole flock will die. If you were to try to move too fast, the animals could die. Let my lord then go on ahead of me, while I proceed more slowly at the pace of the livestock before me and at the pace of my children, until I join my lord in Seir." Esau replied, "Let me at least put at your disposal some of the men who are with me." But Jacob said, "For what reason? Please indulge me in this, my lord." So on the same day that Esau began his journey back to Seir, Jacob journeyed to Succoth. There he built a home for himself and made booths for his livestock. That is why the place was called Succoth. Having thus come from Paddan Aram, Jacob arrived safely at the city of Shechem, which is in the land of Canaan, and he encamped in sight of the city. The plot of ground on which he had pitched his tent he bought for 100 pieces of bullion from the descendants of Hamor, the founder of Shechem. He set up a memorial stone there and invoked El, the God of Israel. Stop there for today. And as always, we will close with the Lord's Prayer. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. Lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen. I hope you have a great week, and I will see you next Sunday.